And our headline this Monday night, day number 49 of redistribution that you can believe in, the growing chorus of discontent. Now, every day the voices seem to get a little louder. Americans are unsatisfied with the administration's handling of this economic crisis. Now, they come in the form of moderate Democrats who are on the Hill, and they're upset with the omnibus spending bill. They come in the form of liberal academics like Paul Krugman at the New York Times. He's pushing for a second stimulus package and is criticizing the administration's lack of will to address the tough questions head on. They come in the form of investors like Warren Buffett, who tried to spin it as well as he could today, but even the sage of Omaha had to admit that the country is probably looking at 1970s-style inflation on the horizon. And they come in the form of conservatives who can see the American dream being engulfed by an ever-expanding government. When reporters at the New York Times asked the president about the socialism label over the weekend, the president at first thought that they were joking. He didn't answer the question. Then, apparently nervous about the damage already being done to his agenda by what the rest of us see as obvious, the president called the reporters back, and he had this to say.
I was thinking about it as I was getting on the copter, because it was hard for me to believe you were entirely serious about that socialist question. I did think it might be useful to point out that it wasn't under me that we started buying a whole bunch of shares of banks. We've actually been operating in a way that is entirely consistent with free market principles, and that some of the same folks who are throwing the word socialist around can't say the same.
Now, tell it to Wall Street, Mr. President, where the Dow Jones lost another 79 points today, closing at a 12-year low. Sounds like they don't have confidence in you either. And joining us tonight is Indiana Republican Congressman Mike Pence. Congressman, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Sean.
If we look at the market reaction, if we look at Wall Street, if we look at everything that the president has proposed, why is there this repeated reaction negative?
Well, I think it's because the American people know we can't borrow and spend and bail our way back to a growing economy. The president may accurately point out that the Wall Street bailout started under his predecessor, but it has continued and expanded in the form of the stimulus bill, and now will expand in the form of this omnibus bill with a dramatic increase in domestic spending and 9,000 earmarks. But the American people just know better, Sean. They know that the real answer here is for Washington to begin to practice real fiscal discipline. That'll give confidence to the markets that Washington gets it. And then we need to pass fast-acting tax relief for small business owners and working families. And that's what's going to be necessary to get this economy moving again, just like it did in the early 1980s.
Well, look, I think Barack Obama's plans are socialist. And, $634 billion down payment on health care, I think that's socialism. If we had TARP 1, if we had the stimulus plan, the omnibus plan, which increases spending 8% in an economic slowdown, redistributing wealth from the rich to poor, why do you think he's so sensitive to that label?
Well, I think it's because the American people know that, and history teaches, that the command and control style, the European style of socialism, is an economic prescription for failure. But, as much as the president might bristle about the term, the reality is when you look at the president's multi-trillion-dollar budget, you look what he has in mind for health care, you look at what he has in mind in terms of an enormous increase in taxes on virtually every American, energy taxes on every homeowner and renter, a micromanagement of our economy in so many different ways. Sean, it's really hard to argue that this isn't a fundamental transformation of our economy to look more like European-style socialism.
What do you make of Warren Buffett today? First of all, he comes out against a couple of the president's own policies, cap and trade for one. He's against card check number two. But Buffett then went on to say people are frightened. He said it's contagious. He's never seen the American people more fearful. And then he talked about the muddled messages from the White House and predicts a shambles for years to come. Didn't this fear come from the White House directly, though, Congressman?
Well, there was an enormous amount of pessimism. It seemed like weeks and weeks on end until the president came to the floor of Congress. I welcomed his optimistic tone expressed before that joint session of Congress. But look, the problem the American people are having with this president is not personal. He remains very personally popular. I think the American people admire him and his family. The problem is with the policies. The American people know we cannot borrow and spend and bail our way back to a growing America. They want a fundamentally different route, and it's fiscal discipline and tax relief. That's what they know will work.
Well, that's what I want. We now, if we add up the numbers, we're talking about $50 trillion in losses if we look at the worldwide economy here. I would argue that the president's waging war against business, waging war against responsible behavior, and redistributing this wealth. The question I have, do you think that he has scared the markets, scared the American people, and do you agree with me that he's cooking the books when he gives us these numbers, these rosy projections?
Well, it's really hard to believe, as the president's budget suggests, that there's going to be, I think the projection is 4% growth next year in his budget. You know, I don't know anybody that can say that with a straight face, Sean. Look, the reality here, to your point, is the president's talking about, in the midst of a recession, the president is talking about raising taxes on virtually every American. To your point, you know, more than half of the Americans who file income tax returns over the level the president wants to raise taxes are small business owners filing as individuals. Then the energy tax is going to hit every homeowner and every renter in this country, particularly in places like the Midwest. I think it's those policies that are causing the American people to recoil at the president's program. And look, you just got to walk away from these big government solutions.
Let me ask you a last
question. And get back to fiscal discipline and growth.
We heard last week about a big shouting match that the staffers in Nancy Pelosi's office were kicked out, that she and Harry Reid and Dick Durbin were cursing at each other. We also read the 49 Blue Dog Democrats would work with the Republicans because they're skittish politically, and we know Harry Reid doesn't have the votes in the Senate for the omnibus bill. Do you sense a backlash now that the American people are getting aware of what's actually being done here?
I really do, and I think this omnibus bill is it's getting enough attention on your air and on the radio, Sean, but I think many Americans just this past weekend started to pay attention. I mean, here's a Congress that's bringing forward a bill to fund the federal government, and it's the largest increase in discretionary spending since the Carter years, with 9,000 earmarks. The American people don't want spending as usual, pork barrel as usual. They want fiscal discipline and policies for growth that will work.
All right, Congressman Mike Pence, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Sean.